sur une situation jusqu'alors structurée.
Bonjour tout le monde. So we will start again the day, the afternoon with three papers in English. Two papers in English and one in French. I don't know, Gert, what you will. Maybe you will switch last minute. Gert is an all showman, so we can do whatever. Anyways, now we will have Felipe Muhr. I hope this is the correct pronunciation.
I don't know.
Who is a visual artist from Santiago, Chile. He has developed a research based on an expanded notion of drawing and its narrative possibilities, including painting, comics, publication, and installations. Felipe holds a degree in art from Chile, an MFA in illustration from FIT, State University of New York, and an advanced master in artistic research at St. Lucas School of Arts, Antwerp. So Felipe has worked as an illustrator for more than a decade, drawing for newspapers, magazines, educational textbooks, and public museums, which has allowed him to learn and apply the vocabulary of illustration in his work, using drawing as a way of thinking to raise questions about the role and meaning of pictures in nonfiction and pedagogical context. Felipe is currently a resident at the HISC postgraduate program in Gent and lives and works in Antwerp, which is why he's with us today. So
thank you. Should I wear a mask?
No, you don't have to.
Okay, great. Thank you for the presentation. I'm very glad and happy to be here. Can you hear me well? Okay. So the title of my presentation is Drawing Impersonations, Observations on the Original Work of Jorge Christie Mouat. It's a long name for a short presentation, so I will start right now. So I'm going to share with you a part of the research I have been working on and off since 2014. Specifically, the process behind an artistic research on the early work by an overlooked Chilean comics pioneer. At the center of this research, there are two works in drawing that I developed taking as a starting point comics drawn by other people, with the aim of inquiring and understanding about the place of authorship in the creation of commercial art, particularly in comics starring Disney characters. Yes, the first one, set in this presentation as an introduction, is this one, made in 2015. Para dibujar al Pato Donald, or how to draw Donald Duck, is an ink drawing based on Disney magazines published in Chile between the 60s and the 90s, which are the magazines that I grew up with. It consists of a diagram with hundreds of objects and graphic gestures extracted from the magazines, redrawn and classified as an instruction manual. By then, I was researching on the story of influence of Donald Duck as a cartoon character beyond animation, covering the reasons for his popularity and his international influence. The diagram makes reference to the book Para leer al Pato Donald by Ariel Dorfman and Armand Matelart, published in Chile in 1971. How to Read Donald Duck is the name in English. It's a unique book, not only as a manual of decolonization, as was defined by John Berger, but because it's one of the first examples of critical analysis of comics in Latin America. At the same time, it is a cultural artifact difficult to understand outside its context. The book takes on the task of unveiling imperialist subtext in Disney magazines published in the midst of the socialist Unidad Popular government in Chile, led by Salvador Allende, demonstrating that there seems to be nothing better than a Disney comic book to bring Yankee doctrine directly to child readers. Dorfman and Matelart recognized the power of comics as a mass medium, and this is where they also warn of its danger. Donald Duck's message was clear: triumphalist capitalism, sexual puritanism, exoticism, and worker exploitation. In this book, the stories, text, and characters are closely analyzed, but little is said about the drawings. An interesting detail is that the stories selected and reproduced in the book come from anonymous authors, all under the signature of Walt Disney, unknown to readers, whose work was altered and printed on an industrial scale. In Chile alone, Disney magazines had over 1 million readers by the 1970s. Although at first glance, everything seems flattened by the Disney identity, there are a multitude of voices in the comics referenced by Dorfman and Matelart. My research then became a work of observation. I began to look for patterns, to identify authors, to copy drawings. Relying as much as possible on the drawing reference, I realized that the spirit of this process was to reduce my hand as much as possible, seeking a way of drawing the steel from the anonymous authors in my magazine collection. If someone were to learn to draw only from those comics, perhaps they would end up with something similar. This sort of reverse engineering is in turn a way of getting even closer to those drawings with which I learned to read, look, and draw like so many children in Chile, and which motivated the second part of my graphic research. For there is something that Dorfman and Matelart failed to explain. It is why we like this comic so much. During the writing of my written research, I found an online database, a cover corresponding to a magazine called Album Mickey, apparently published in the 1930s in Santiago, as seen on the right. Since Disney magazines were not officially published in Chile until 1962, I discarded this as a bad copy of original Disney material. As you can see, it references a poster. And it was 2 years later that I decided to track down copies of the magazine and start from this clue, a drawing research process that would allow me to take a closer look at the work of a comic book author barely known and studied in Chile. Album Mickey seems to have passed into oblivion. In the collection of the Chilean National Library, I was able to verify that the magazine was published weekly in 40 issues between 1937 and 1938, and that it was published on Fridays for all the children of America, as stated in its advertising. Proof of this are some contest winners living in Havana or Buenos Aires. Album Mickey was a very complete children's magazine, in a large format and wide range of content for its reduced time between printings. It is immediately notorious that almost the entire content of the magazine corresponds to illustrations and comic strips of popular foreign cartoon characters such as Popeye, Felix the Cat, the Three Little Pigs, and various Disney characters showing up also in written stories, drawing games, cutouts, single-panel cartoons, and even replying letters to readers. In other words, Album Mickey achieves the impossible. Characters from rival companies share the scene in stories full of Chilean slang and customs, where they frequently meet in places in Santiago and even make references to other national magazines. The character designs deviated from the kind of standard drawing expected of comics licensed by the US American creative industries, with experienced cartoonists with a background in the world of animation. It is also notable that except for occasional drawings by authors Carreño, González, and Pedro Olmos, almost all the material in Album Mickey is signed by an author named Jorge Christie Mouat. You can see his signature on every single drawing. There's a zoom of it there. The magazine then was sustained by the hand of a young and versatile cartoonist capable of drawing almost anything. I could find the name of Walt Disney only once in the 40 issues of the magazine. Who is the author? Little is known about Jorge Christie Mouat, here on the right on the bicycle. Information about his life is fragmentary and he left no descendants. According to researcher Jorge Rojas Flores, Christie was born in 1915 or 1916 in Chile in a family of Scottish origin. He was left-handed and shy, and he was forced from an early age to use his right hand, which would have produced a stuttering that was with him until his adult life. Testimonies diverge. Some versions indicate that he never overcame his shyness, while others point out that he was sociable and bohemian. Christie began his career collaborating in children's magazines as early as 1936, where he would draw Disney characters for the first time, including Donald Duck and Mickey. In June 1937, he started working in Album Mickey. The first Chilean Disney magazine had been published with drawings under Christie's signature, although nobody in California knew about it. Album Mickey is published until 1938, coinciding with Christie's departure to work at the conservative newspaper El Diario Ilustrado. It is here where Christie begins the mature and most popular stage of his career. Christie continues to work as a cartoonist with original characters such as Chu Man Fu, depicted here, a daily comic strip informed by Hollywood movies and racist stereotypes, and widely acknowledged as the first Chilean comic strip. A later compilation of Chu Man Fu comics would become the very first Chilean comics magazine. Later on, Christie worked as a toy maker and as an illustrator for children's books with striking color covers for the publisher Rapa Nui. Here we can see the complete collection of originals of the National Library in Chile. It's only this material. Jorge Christie Mouat died on May 5th, 1954 at the age of 37, apparently in poverty and homelessness, although so far I have not found enough data to corroborate this story. Although Christie's gesture of appropriation is far from being an isolated practice, with examples of similar contemporary strategies found everywhere from Brazil to France to Japan, in Christie's case, his work is defined by abduction. Example of this is this copy work found in Album Mickey, probably by Carreño, this cover right here. The first two, this one and this one, are covers based on other covers of official Disney material, even single panels from newspaper comic strips, which to my knowledge were not published in Chile at the time. The color choices are far from the original reference, but still these are copies made probably as a way to deal with reproduction constraints. On the other hand, these examples of drawings by Jorge Christie use similar references, but reframe those references into action in a complete original story. This, for example, this one is an adaptation of a 1931 Mickey Mouse daily strip by Floyd Gottfredson, with a script by Walt Disney himself, summarized and redrawn by Christie. In this second example, you can see here, this is the original comic strip by Floyd Gottfredson, and these are the panels that Christie used as a reference, and these are the results of that process. In this case, the original strip has been completely readapted to a different page composition and different pace. It is a visual translation of the story, including different dialogue and extra panels when needed. This is the original, the copy. We can also see that even work by Christie not starred by Disney characters still is informed by American comic strips. As far as I know, Crazy Cat had not been published in Chile at the time. At quick glance, it is possible to suspect that the magazine was almost a personal project for Christie, although he was most likely following current popular trends and characters. There is still some place for his personality to show through the Disney bill. The best example of this is Mickey versus Raton Perez, a delirious crime genre comic published weekly in a 6-page spread and his most complex and ambitious story. Here, Christie doesn't copy a story or rearrange his panels. He puts that speed training to use in a completely original series without abandoning the Disney actors. The story starts the envious Raton Perez, or the Tooth Fairy in the Ibero-American oral tradition, who, to take revenge on Mickey Mouse's popularity, kidnaps Minnie and triggers a series of events involving pirates, casinos, spies, cowboys, and revolutions. The story is left unfinished on a cliffhanger when the magazine closes, coinciding with Christie's departure to work at the Diario Ilustrado. Looking for ways to approach and better understand his work, I began to do what Christie did with his own work and set out to copy his drawings. What else would Christie have done in my place? Then I spent a better part of a year reproducing in freehand each of the cartoons Christie drew for the comic Mickey vs. Raton Perez, the magazine star cartoon and my personal favorite. The result consists of 2010 ink drawings on paper that plagiarize frame by frame the complete story published in Album Mickey. As much as possible, I imitated the palette of the original publication because when the magazine had a bigger budget, the comic was printed in up to 3 colors. Their drawings are far from being faithful copies of Christie's drawings, but as he might have done with the original Disney comics, I did the best I could. The work, Mickey versus Raton Perez after Christie, as you see it here, was exhibited in the summer of 2017 in the group show Historia Mutante at the Chilean Museum of Contemporary Art, which also included the work How to Draw Donald Duck. The drawings were arranged sequentially on 14 meters of wall where the story could be read by following the drawings from left to right, making a path more similar to a codex and a comic page. And the end of the story was left open with many unsolved enigmas, just like the original story and the career of its author. So the anonymous Disney comics analyzed by Dorfman and Matelar and the pirated and Chilean made Mickey made by Christie suggest to me fascinating aspects of a problem of translation and authorship that is very specific to comics. Disney's official cartoonists develop a graphic language with different accents and variations despite the enormous limitation of the stylistic canon resulting from the homogeneity and commercial performance that their publishing house pursued. They demonstrate with this not only the great flexibility of comics to express singular voices under labor and political constraints, but also the complexities of analyzing a graphic medium without considering its visuality. Jorge Christie, on the other hand, achieves a unique cultural hybrid by combining the popular imaginary of a world center of mass media production with the local Chilean reality, precisely thanks to his graphic instinct to pollute his own hand with foreign drawings and still make his own gesture shine. In both cases, authorship is made flexible, stretched, molded to editorial needs, something that comic creators continue to do, being able to say something even when they are told exactly what to say. Drawing is also a way of reading. In my research, the constant practice of drawing and copying allowed me to a critical, celebratory, and somewhat mysterious approach to the work of other authors, a fundamental exercise to understand my own place as an artist. Christie copies and adopts animated characters, but he does not make a Chilean version of the Disney universe. Rather, he completely ignores the construction of those already established characters and installs a narrative vision of his own in foreign lines and bodies. Christie's work abducts the work of other authors, which gives it a complicated copyright status not feasible in current editorial contexts. Christie Mickeys, Donalds, and Goofies are wolves in sheep's clothing, first hollowed out and then possessed by the vision of a fan author, a voracious consumer of popular culture, an elusive character, an attentive cartoonist, and a true pioneer of the Chilean comic strip, even if cannibalizing on drawings made by a land far, far away. And as a conclusion, he was perhaps not so far away. In 1941, Walt Disney visited Chile under the Good Neighbor policy, a propagandist trip to South America seeking good relations with governments that the US saw in danger of turning to fascism. On his visit, Disney paid a trip to El Diario Ilustrado, where Christie was working at the time. In an eloquent act of cultural colonialism, Walt Disney signed the founding document of the Chilean Cartoonist Alliance as honorary president. Just below his autograph, the signature of Jorge Christie can be seen. Thank you.
Thanks, Felipe, for the fascinating talk and also sharing your own process. Are there questions in the audience, I would just enable the chat in case. Yeah, good enough.
In Yugoslavia, there was Ikamish, he was a Balkan. He did Lakia, he listened to Radio Belgrade, he was then, and Tito liked as well, Donald Trump. And was there something of Chilean?
Yeah, you mean like a Chilean version of Mickey?
Yeah, but the real Chilean with the Chilean characteristics.
I think this would be as close as you can get to a Chilean Mickey in the 1930s. We do have characters that are, we do have a character, a very popular character called Condorito, which could say he's more like a Chilean Mickey because but he's not referencing Disney directly, though there's a story that he was born out of I mean, when Disney went to Chile, he made this trip, and the Chileans didn't like how Disney depicted the Chileans in the movie that he made afterwards as a propaganda. So one cartoonist, out of anger, created this character that was called Condorito. It was a reaction to the Disney movie. But that's not really, I wouldn't say that's a Mickey version or a Chilean version of Mickey. The closest you can get, I would say, is this Mickey that you see right here, that it's not Chilean, but it's in a Chilean context. Actually, in this panel, for example, right here, under it says like, since the characters have been living for so long in Chile, they have become Chilean. So there's this notion that they're visitors and they're foreigners, but they share the space with the Chilean reality. Yeah, I don't have the, if I understood correctly, I don't have the clue of why these characters are so popular. I would say that in the case of Chile, I mean, the Disney magazines published in Chile during the 60s, 70s, and 80s and 90s, they were so popular because they were good, probably. Also because of the amount of magazines that were arriving in Chile. Just it was an industrial scale, so they were everywhere. Even if they were not produced in the Chilean market, they were produced outside and adapted to the Chilean market. But in terms of what insight gave me to draw Christie's characters, and I mean, I could get to Christie's work, not to Disney's work, through this process. I could see how he was fascinated by these characters, but it was a walk into his world more than Disney. So I wouldn't say that. I mean, Christie's work, as Disney-like as it is very personal. It talks a lot about himself, about his own experiences, about being Chilean, and all the references that he makes to Mickey are, this is a foreign character. He's very popular. Raton Perez, which is the character that wants to take revenge. He's very angry with Mickey, as you can see here. He's holding a Mickey magazine, and they're laughing at him because he's not a man enough like Mickey is. So there's always this like, okay, we are less, but I think that there's some rebellious also attitude there. Maybe think a lot about this, the name of the conference, which is like comics on the outside. I don't want to say that being in Chile is being on the outside. I believe that we are a center of whatever is going on there. But there's this reference of something that it's outside there, that it's outside Chile and it's foreign. and also the way he deals with copyright and everything. It's something that only could happen in a place that it's not at the center of the production of this mass media.
There's a question in the chat. We'll just need to be a bit careful when asking questions in the audience. I will maybe ask you to come closer to the computer. So Donna, one of our colleagues from Gent, asked, thank you. I would like to ask about humor. I mean, everybody can read.
Yeah. Did you notice was funny? Yeah, that's a great question. These comics are so funny. I mean, there are many boring comics. I mean, if you study comics from the 1930s, they're boring things as well. These ones are super funny. They still hold up. Sometimes the humor is very banal and very like childish, but sometimes it feels very adult and politically incorrect, especially now. It's very violent. It has no boundaries in terms of I mean, there's many things that could not fly today, let's say, and they're very funny. And that's, I believe that's where his voice as an artist shines, because he cannot compete in terms of drawing ability, in terms of the canon that Disney, for example, promotes. It's a famous story that when Disney went to Chile, he didn't came back with any cartoonist. Like everybody was applying, but there were not enough for him. But maybe because they were looking outside. But actually, this is the kind of cartoonist that was necessary for that kind of story. And his drawing, his way of telling the story, and even the pace of the rhythm of the comics, it's very, very funny. Especially in this comic that doesn't have balloons. So you read the story, you read the text, and then you see the image. And both, the relationship between both of these images of these devices is really funny. I think this kind of comic should make a comeback.
There's two more questions and one in the audience, and then we'll have to go a bit fast, I think.
Yeah, a connection between Christie's works and the Tijuana Bibles. Yeah. Totally, yes. Tijuana Bibles are these very crude drawings, are very pornographic. But I believe, and I'm not an expert on Tijuana Bibles, but I believe that the good thing about when they wanted the drawing in Tijuana Bibles to be like very on the edge, very prohibited, very forbidden. That's why they used popular characters. Christie was not like that. I believe that he was genuinely inspired and he was fascinated by Disney, but also there was a commercial strategy because Disney characters sell. So I think there were both things there. I don't think there was like this kind of like edgy bad boy kind of thing with the Tijuana Bibles that were very for adults. These comics were for children. And
also the Tijuana Bibles, they're all drawn nearly the same. They really just use the characters.
And they were anonymous too.
There's a question from Giorgio. I think Maja is more of a comment.
Okay, and there's a question here. Should I? No?
You can read it, but I don't think it's really a question.
I read that there were a lot of adaptations, and sometimes the interpretations of Dorman's and Mallory comics from bad translations, emphasizing militarism aspects, concepts from Chile. Yes. Yeah, that's a yes. But it has been very overblown. The censorship and the translation of comics present in the Dorfman and Batelart book. I did a research on that as well, and I found the originals, and they're not that different. So it was more a reading on those comics than an actual pressure from the international market to say something through those comics, specifically to the Chilean audience. But that's another research.
Giorgio, for the last question. Can you come here, maybe? Yeah, thank you.
It was just a very good question about if you can expand a little bit more on the captions under the panels rather than balloons.
Do you want me to read them?
No. Why the choice? Where does it come from?
So this is called didascalia in Spanish. I don't know the name in English. Maybe the caption. Okay. Yeah, but this kind of comic is called didascalia. And in the Chilean comic scholarship, there's a difference between, okay, these are, when was the modern comic strip in Chile, and when was the proto-comic that is like this? And in Album Mickey, these two comics share the same space. So you see, I showed you a more modern comic, like one more successful, you know, panels and more like dynamic compositions made by Christie. And this one, I don't know why they're so static. I think the influence of the movies is still very much there. But I believe that I take this comic as a more innovative in terms of narration than the other ones, even if it has an early device of, narrative device, because I believe the stories are more well done. I think Christie shines more in this kind of thing than in the other ones.
In France, it was exactly the same.
Really?
By Hachette, but it was not redrawn, but they set up the balloons.
Okay.
Sometimes they have to redraw one tree, for example, or the image is completely decentrated because the balloon is.
Yeah, it might have something to do with how the audience also were reading comics at the time.
Because it was American, they didn't use enough text. So.
Interesting. That's cool.
There was a general system in Belgian newspapers as well. The Disney comics in Belgian newspapers also at this time.
Yeah.
It was a way of this exportation production to be acceptable.
Yeah, I personally like how limited it is, how like straightforward, limited, and it's easy for me to make also work about this because it doesn't go everywhere. So yeah.
Many thanks, Felipe.
Thanks to you for listening. Yeah. Should I? You take care of that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Your mask.